Welcome to the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver podcast. We're happy you're here. On the podcast, we're certain that you'll relate to the caregiver stories and find comfort with your honorary sisters. Now, before we start, I want to remind you to go to our website, confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com, and sign up for our newsletter. It's full of useful information that you can immediately use. Now, let's learn more about today's guest.
Hey guys, I'm JJ.
I'm Natalie.
And I'm Emily.
And welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver. So today we are excited, thrilled, to have our sister in caring, Robin Weeks. And so she is, and I'm going to tell you, Emily, she has quite the confession. She actually rivals our mom. I'm going to tell you. So she's going to be sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly with respect to caregiving. I think we all can relate. So like us, Robin's been a caregiver, but honestly, she's so much more. So Jay, why don't you give our audience, viewers, whoever who is listening, a little bit about Robin so they get to know her.
So I love to give a little bit of background as well. We met Robin at our first conference that we went to, the Care Colloquium Roanoke. And she was a jewel just because we were newbies and she's been at it a bit longer. And so she was really kind to us and kind of took us by the hand right off the bat. We told her that we stalk her social media and she was okay with that. So we appreciate that, Robin.
Yeah, I love it.
Robin has she spent 20 years in the personal development field, working with managers and executives. After the death of her father in 2012, she began looking after her mother, and she eventually moved her mom in with her in Virginia when she needed more care. What I love is that Robin says the journey of caregiving came unexpectedly and with no directions. And that's for all of us. We had no directions, and that she was not prepared for what was to come over the years. After her mother died in 2018, she spent a year reflecting on how being her mother's caregiver had changed her. She now shares those life experiences and lessons learned in her coaching and leadership development company out of Virginia. And like I said, we are always learning something from her as well on her website and social media at mypivotalpoint.com. So definitely check that out. Robin, we are so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to see you gals again and to meet you, Emily. This is such a treat. I'm so happy to be here.
Good.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your caregiving journey? Because I know we've all had it, whether it's long distance, close by, your parent, your spouse, your family, your friend. Tell us a little bit about your caregiving journey.
Well, sure. So my dad was diagnosed with a terminal illness in 2011 and was given 6 months to live. And, really in reflection, I think that's when I started caring for my mother. I just didn't know that's what it was.
Wow.
So she was in Tennessee and I live in Virginia. So I was going down once a month as my brother was living there. In town, so he could help out. But I was going down once a month, to give him a break and to check in on them. My dad died in 2012, and I kept going to Tennessee every month. My brother died the same week my dad died. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, here was my mom. They died 5 days apart, left alone completely. And
oh my gosh.
She, so I kept going down once a month to check on her, and she was functioning, but I mean, she was just in the depths of grief beyond what I could understand. So at any rate, after a year of doing that, I sat her down. I said, Mom, I can't keep making this drive to Tennessee. Yeah. How about you move to the mountains of Virginia with me? Because she loved my farm here in the mountains. And she said, okay. That was easy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Wait a second. Okay, I have to ask you, where in Tennessee? Because we're from Tennessee. We're from outside Knoxville.
She and my father were living in Maryville, and they spent their entire married lives in Knoxville. And I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, too.
Okay.
All right. We know exactly where you are.
Oh my gosh, we know where you're at. We played against them in sports. We went to Anderson County High School. You're welcome for all that, people.
I went to Bearden High School.
Oh, touch my pearls.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
So
funny.
you moved her. I know you said, and I've seen the pictures and stuff of your farm. So you
Oh,
moved her there
beautiful.
with you. She willingly came.
Well, I will tell you, I did not move her into my house because
Okay.
I have to tell you, my mom and I living together, that was a death sentence for us both.
Mm.
That was not going to happen.
Emily's like, uh-oh.
That was not going to happen.
Okay.
Not if we both wanted to live a little bit longer. So I actually found a wonderful place in assisted living for her that was 20 minutes from my house.
Okay.
And that worked out great because she could have, I brought her home out here to the farm on the weekends. So she would spend Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday with me. And then she would spend the weekdays at her apartment in assisted living where, she was still in really good physical shape and great mental shape. So, it worked out really great for a number of years. It was awesome. And she loved this place. Oh my God. She used to sit on my porch. My front porch looks over the mountains. And she would look at we have lots of buzzards out here in the mountains. And, buzzards, they're really big, right? But they look really pretty when they fly. I sit there and she's like, aren't those eagles just gorgeous flying like that? I'd go, yeah, Mom, they're beautiful.
Look, those eagles.
She loved it out here. And she spent probably up to almost 3+ years being able to come out here on the weekends, which, had its pluses and minuses. And then she finally one day, her physical abilities were declining. And she would come out here, and finally I had to bring one of those little rolling walkers with her because it was just, my house was just not set up for somebody like that, and she headed back to the bedroom one day and she turned around, she looked at me and she said, Robin, I think this will be the last weekend I can stay out here. Nearly broke my heart.
Yeah.
Nearly broke my heart because I really enjoyed her being here most of the time. But she started declining physically even more. I had to move her to a higher level of assisted living care. And, and then it got to the point I couldn't even really get her out of the building because she was just she was in a wheelchair. She just wasn't physically able to do a lot. So, she was in her 90s, and in September of 2017, she had a hemorrhagic stroke. And it took away her voice. It took away her ability to feed herself, dress herself, do anything. But her mind was still sharp. And I'll tell you a funny story. You'll love this. So she used to wheel herself down from her room to the nurse's station and get her evening glass of wine. She said, it's all I got to look forward to every day. And I don't know if you know this, but in assisted living, if you want wine, you have to have a doctor's prescription for it.
Wow.
Yeah, they won't let you keep it in the room. They serve it to you.
Remember that, girls.
Make a mental note. We're looking for an assisted living facility that serves wine.
Yes. So they would keep her wine, and she would wheel herself down there to the nurse's station. She said, I'm ready for my glass of wine. And they would serve her up a glass of wine. Well, she couldn't drink her wine anymore after the stroke. And one day we were sitting out there in the lobby, and there was a woman in the assisted living wing where she was, who had the early stages of Alzheimer's. So she was wandering, and she would wander into my mother's room and wander around. And, she wasn't ready for memory care, I guess, at that point. That's why she was in the assisted living wing. At any rate, my mother and I were sitting out there, and while her voice was garbled because of the stroke, occasionally she could get a word out or a sentence. And she leaned over to me and she said, Robin, see that woman over there? She's crazy. And I said, Mom, she has Alzheimer's. She leaned back, she says, she's crazy, Robin. I said, Mom, it's Alzheimer's. And she looked at me, she said, what's the difference?
Oh, my
we
goodness.
were howling, the nurses. We were all laughing so hard. It was hilarious. So I'm like, you're right, Mom. I don't think there's much difference.
Yeah, that's it.
So she lived for 6 months, and I think she said she was not eating. She knew in her mind what was wrong with herself, her body, everything. She knew she couldn't get her words out. She knew she couldn't do anything. And I think she quit eating. She just signed off. She's 94 years old and she signed off. And I sat with her for 4 days while she died, which was quite honestly a very beautiful experience. And she wasn't sick. She wasn't in pain. She was just ready. She always said to me, I'm ready to move over and let somebody else have this spot on this planet. And I loved that, you know. She used to say to me all the time, she'd sit on my porch, I wonder when I'm going to die. I wonder how long I'm going to live. And it used to just like stun me. I go, oh my God, well, you can live as long as you like, Mom, you know.
Don't say that.
Don't say that. But I got used to it and I realized, you know, she's an old woman. She's coming to the end of her life. She knows it. She's just wondering.
Yeah.
And when I moved her into the higher level of assisted living, I'd fixed up her little bedroom for her because, you know, you just have a bedroom at that stage of your life. And I fixed it up real cute. And she looked around and she looked at me and she said, is this where I'm going to die? And I looked at her and I said, well, I don't know. Where would you like to die? And she looked at me, she said, well, I guess this will do. It's kind of cozy.
You know, isn't that interesting? You know, I mean, if you really think about it, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
We're all guaranteed to die. Mortality rate's still at 100%. But, you know, when you have a comfort about it and you don't have fear about it.
Yeah.
You know, would you say that lack of fear, was your mom faithful? Was she a faithful woman?
Not really.
So it wasn't like spiritual based.
No.
She just was like, I'm here. This is okay. I guess I can. I don't know that I would ever be like, well, this is a good enough place to go. I mean, seriously.
But she was just comfortable with her life and comfortable with the fact she was just at ease with it, I guess, is what I hear, which is somewhat comforting, you know, that she's just, all right, I'm good with that. There's no regret almost, and it's okay. So no fear,
she was
maybe.
Totally at peace with the idea that she was at the end of her life. You know, she would say things like, I've lived long enough. I'm ready to move over and let somebody else have this spot here on this planet. And I mean, you know, but towards the end there, even before the stroke and a little bit during the stroke, when she could still get a word out once in a while, she would say, I'm ready to go home. And I would say, where's home? And she'd say, I don't know. I just am ready to go home. And I just think, you know, she knew when she moved up here, you know, she'd lost her husband and her firstborn son in a week. And she knew she wasn't going to live long. I'm quite frankly surprised she lived 6 years after they died, you know?
That's true.
You know?
That's true.
Now, while you're the one that's in Virginia, right, Robin? So did you have other family that was there helping you care for her?
No, I have two younger brothers who live out of state. I won't mention where.
Yeah.
And they popped in about once a year. Yeah.
So let's kind of dive into a little bit of that, because I think about our siblings and stuff. I think because part is work, because you also did professional leadership training,
right,
and still do training, right, and both caregiving and still leadership. And but so let's talk about how it affected relationships. How did as your parents aged and things like that, how did you and your siblings? Because it sounds like there's 4 of you.
There were 4 of us. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so how did you guys deal with that as your parents started aging? Like, did you all have conversations about it?
Well, you know what, Natalie? No, because we didn't know. We didn't know to do that. I didn't know to do that. I mean, of course I know now, but I didn't know to sit my 3 brothers down and say, okay, who's going to assume role of primary? I was appointed POA as healthcare for both of my parents. So I think that sort of by default dumped it in my lap, you know. But I will tell you this, and I read a study about this, when the daughter steps in, or often like in a situation where there's 3 of you, when one daughter steps in, and I don't think this is your case at all from what I've learned about the 3 of you, but when there are male siblings, then the daughter steps in, the men step out. Our uncles might kill us, and my aunt might say that felt that way with our dad's parents. Yeah. I think that there was our aunt and our 4 siblings. Our dad passed, so it was our aunt and the 3, and the boys always helped, but they really looked to her to take the lead, I think. And so I think
I think that's a true thing, but I think there's also stigma around women are the ones who are meant to do this.
Yeah, there is. It's, I think that's also one of the reasons why caregivers sort of remain in the background in the workplace too, because it's still considered women's work.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Because, hunter-gatherers.
Yeah.
And then you have the women who are taking care of, multi-generations and the food and all that. Well, I mean, I did not nail that, Robin. I mean, I'm not hunting. I'm probably out hunting and gathering before I'm out cooking dinner. My husband will tell you he's starving. So I'm not doing that. Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that the women hang out in the background. JJ and I was looking at this really cool study. We haven't done this on anything else.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. The cost of caregiving to Massachusetts employees, but it translates to other. So here's the thing that was so interesting. Extensive research shows both caregiving rates and salary vary substantially based on sex, race, and ethnicity. American women are nearly 50% more likely than American men to report workplace impacts due to caregiving for an older relative, and their average salaries are normally 20% lower.
Yeah.
And that's the part that, like, if you're female and you're trying to work, I think that would be really hard. I mean, because we already know there's a wage discrepancy in industries. And so I think we talk about the financial pieces and things like that. That's hard. So from a work perspective, how did caregiving with your mom, and whether long distance or local, how did that impact?
Well, once I got her moved here, I mean, and I felt like, okay, good. I can, everything will be fine, because she was in good shape. Mm-hmm. But what started happening was I found myself having to go by more frequently. She was so lonely, she was having to make new friends at 87 or 8 or whatever. And, and she was emotionally dependent upon me. Yeah. And while I tried to sort of push her, like you push the kid out the door to go make friends. I was like, Mom, go make friends. They're having a social tonight. Go do that. Well, I want you to come with me. But no, I can't. You need to go by yourself. And anyway, she just was lonely. Part of it, she still never really, I think she suffered from what they call complicated grief. But she just never got through the grief process. Yeah. But what was your question?
About your work. It's okay.
Oh yeah, my work. So as she started as her physical needs decreased, that meant I had to do more doctor's appointments, more shopping for her, more check-ins with the, PT staff and the doctors and the nurses and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, it was on top of everything. And more healthcare management is what that really means. And more emotional support, and then more sort of daily support, because, in assisted living, people sometimes think, oh, you don't have to worry about anything. And that's what my brothers thought. She's cared for. Wrong. Yeah. There were like 81 residents in that wing, and there was one CNA, a certified nursing assistant, for every 12 to 18 of them.
That's true.
And that individual worked a 10 to 12 hour shift. They didn't have time to sit with her and talk with her. They did. Right. Loved her, and she was funny as hell and a witty old bitch. But
I respect that.
I love her already.
I respect that. Yeah, but so I had to start cutting back on my work. And the last probably 3 years of her life, I cut 30% of my income because I couldn't carry the client load that I had carried full time.
Yeah.
I was spending, 20 to 30 hours a week on her care.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And so I would think that would be so much.
So you work for yourself though.
Yeah. I'm self-employed.
So I thought.
So, I made that choice. I felt like I had no choice.
Right.
I had to keep working.
Yeah. Right.
But I couldn't carry the full client load that I normally would have because of the demands of her care.
Right.
And so I did make that choice. Someone in a full-time position would have made a different kind of choice. Right. They would have either quit their job or they would have worked part-time maybe or something. But, it's a choice.
So at that time prior, you were just doing more of a management leadership training. Yeah. And then somehow you transitioned. So I know that your mom passed in 2018. You said that. Yeah. So, You said, and your bio, you said you took some time off because it was like, okay, I got maybe regroup is the word, or I got to get my head clear. And then you started caregiving consulting. You started working with caregivers. Maybe that's where your heart led you. How did you get to this point where you're doing that kind of consulting and that kind of working with us?
Yeah.
People like us.
Yeah. Well, it was a couple of things. So, the years while I was caring for her and I was training managers in my leadership classes, I would walk into our leadership training class, and I'd hold my phone up and I'd say, okay, guys, you know what to do with these, but I have to leave mine on because I'm on call 24/7 because I'm caring for my mom, because you never know when the phone's going to ring, right, gals? You never know,
That's right.
So I would just say, can't turn it off. And what has started happening was some of these managers would come up to me after the class or during a break and say, Robin, my parents live 3 states away and they're getting older and I'm starting to get worried about what to do with them. Or Robin, I just moved here from another state and so I could move in with my mom because she's showing signs of dementia. Or Robin, it was like questions and questions. And you know what? I had answers. Because I was in the midst of this.
Right. Yeah.
So when my mother died in 2018, it was the end of January. I'll never forget. It was freezing cold. And I sprained my ankle that night. She died. God bless you, Mom. I think you'll hear this from former caregivers, maybe a lot, but that was like a horrible year. It was just, I was not expecting where I was mentally. I was in a state of depression. I was grieving. I was sad. I didn't want to leave my house. I felt like I had been set out on a river or in the ocean with no oars in a boat. I was completely unmoored.
Yeah.
I was just lost. I was lost. And no one understood it. There wasn't anyone I could really talk to about it. And I basically sat here in my living room one day in February, and my mother used to always say to me, what are you going to do with all your time when I'm gone? I was just laughing.
I hear you, Mom.
Are you kidding me, Mom? All the things I've given up for you. I never said that out loud, but But here I was sitting in my living room one day, a month after she died, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I have an empty calendar. What am I going to do with myself?
Wow.
So I just really, I got back to work with my leadership work, but my head was somewhere else. My head was just in another place. And I really took some time to really figure out what to do with this experience, because what I came to was, wow, that is probably the most profound thing I have ever done in my life, is care for my mother. Mm. Now, like many daughters, we had our issues for years.
I'm surprised by that. I would have zero problems.
Emily, what is she talking about?
I have no clue.
Yeah, I know most daughters, they're best friends, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Notice all the way, for those of you who can't see our faces, we're all sort of looking to the side like, right?
No. Yeah, but what I realized was the point I got to somewhere in that year was, wow, this had meaning for me. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of other people I've been meeting that are suffering because they feel alone and isolated and don't know where to turn for help or answers or resources. And so I started looking into a way to serve caregivers in a coaching capacity, because that's what I do with leaders. And I found a training company. Can I name it on the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay. Denise Brown, she's in Chicago. You know her. She has a company called the Carriers Academy.
Right.
And she's been doing this since 1996, I think.
Mm.
She has some incredible training programs. I enrolled in a caregiving consultant program that was, I think, an 8-week program. And I got certified at the end of 2019. What I will say this, what what hit me, and the reason I made this decision to do something with this experience, was one, the number of caregivers I was meeting who were exactly where I was, alone and isolated and not knowing where to turn. Stressed out, burned out, like, wow, it doesn't have to be this way. And two, for me, caring for my mother was probably the most profound feeling of compassion I think I've ever had in my life. I don't think I've ever felt that much compassion for another human being. And it came from watching an old woman die, When she died. Oh, can I share this with you? Because we're supposed to.
Absolutely.
But this is poignant. So she started dying on a Friday, and hospice called me, and said, you need to come on. And she was kind of mentally checked out. I think, there's certain phases of dying, and this was what they call the active phase. And I sat with her, and my brothers flew in and they flew out. And the night they flew in, my nephews were there. My brothers and my nephews are all like 6 feet tall. There was like giant men in the room, it was funny. And it was really dark. Then we had the lights on in the room. And my mother had been pretty much checked out,
Right.
All of a sudden she sat straight up in bed. And she looked around the room at these men like, oh my gosh, there are giants in the room. And then she started pointing at them and started talking. You couldn't understand a word she said. It was all garbly-goop, but she knew what she was saying.
Yeah.
And she started pointing at them and reaching for their hands and bringing them to her and talking to them while they sat next to her and hugging on them. And this went on. It was midnight that night. And this went on for, I don't know, half an hour or more. And finally, she leaned back on the bed and she pulled me over. I'll cry. She pulled me over to her. And she pulled me to her face, and she held my face, and she leaned into my ear, and as clear as day, she said, "Thank you."
Oh, Robin.
That was on a Sunday night, and she died on a Tuesday morning. So that was, all I can say is that was all of that. This almost 7 years, everything was just like, I can't leave this alone.
Yeah.
I can't leave it alone. And I can't let anybody else be alone to do this because.
Yeah.
Well, in your story, and I hear, pieces, family even in itself is hard. And I know the three of us, even there are people that come in and out and maybe they don't agree with the decisions that we've made. And the fact that what a blessing that those words, like, I know we look at that and that passing of our dad has always been, it's something that's so hard for us because it was so sudden. And if I had just had a word or a glimmer or something from him. So that's very difficult. But I look at the people that maybe don't understand all the things that we've done with Mom. They don't quite agree with some of the decisions, but that is just such a blessing. Like, to me, that even like my heart for you is just like, what a blessing that you were able to pull that together no matter what happened in those years, no matter differences or anything, and just say, here it is. I want the best for my mom. And that's fantastic. That's amazing.
Well, and I would even add to, Robin, I just think you said there are times that it was maybe tenuous, or she sounds quite the spunky woman.
Yeah.
And especially she sounds so spunky. And so I feel like Emily's got tears over there. I'm like, oh, Emily's getting verklempt. I know you are.
It's a little close to home, I'll tell you that.
Yes, it is a little close. So and you know what? It's totally normal to have those feelings and it remind you of others. But I just think it's so important, especially in relationships that are difficult, to find the empathy and to give kindness. Because honestly, there's a book with Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey where she talks about her relationship with her mom and her mom's dying days. It's called What Happened to You. Or not What Happened to You. No, it is What Happened to You. I apologize. And she talks about having to forgiving her mom.
Yeah.
And that relationship. And then that's hard because when you have experiences and they're not great experiences, or they might be tenuous, or you might push up against each other, and to be able to say, you know what, I need to forgive for myself. It's not even forgiving for anybody, for her. I need to forgive you for myself because I can't carry it. I just can't. And I think when you're able to do that, I mean, you're just a great example of, you were a committed daughter.
Well, when I realized after about year or two, I was her caregiver.
Yeah.
Somebody called me that at her assisted living place. And before I actually really threw myself into this role, which was, as I said, was sort of by default, there were two things I knew. One, I did not want my mother to live the end of her life alone without family. And I was in a place emotionally myself where, like you said, I'd forgiven her for all the stuff that happened in the past. And she was my mother, and I didn't want her to be alone. And I still loved her, you know, and she still loved me.
Oh,
and, I wanted to hold on to that. And I didn't, anyway, it was just, it's just what I did.
I love that.
It's what I did. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, because that's very personal. And that's personal.
Yeah.
And so, and again, we have to find all of that, all of those pieces. Now, Robin, I'm going to tell you this.
What?
The lightning round's coming, and the lightning round is funny.
Okay.
Because I know we've gotten into some really touch stuff that feels good. And Emily's over here almost like, I'm ready to have the tear buckets coming on, but I'm ready. I'm going to tell you right now, Robin's mama was funny. So I mean, you all got a sense of that from, I guess it's a good place to die. I like her already.
Yeah.
And so we've got Sister's Choice on lightning round questions. Hey, Jay, you want to start with Sister's Choice question?
I know what you're going to ask, so I'm going to give you the pleasure of asking the fun question. I'm going to ask because I love this question. Robin, you're out there on your farm. You're beautiful out in the Blue Ridge area. But what is something that you do just for yourself? Like, what is a guilty pleasure for you?
Oh my gosh. Well, I have horses.
Okay.
And I love my horses. And during the years I cared for my mother, in the last few years, I had to give up my horseback riding because I was just too worn out and too stressed. What, you don't put your body on the back of a 1,200-pound animal if you're stressed out, because they'll know it.
Probably a good idea.
So I spent a lot of time on the ground with those guys. But they're one of my guilty pleasures because they cost me a lot of money. But my other guiltiest pleasure, which my mother did share with me, is to just sit on my front porch and look at the mountains.
Oh, that's a good one.
Have a glass of wine and look at the mountains.
So
Robin is getting the prescription when she goes. She wants the prescription for the wine too.
That's
right.
That was a good one, Robin. Okay. All right. Who's next? Em, you next, Natalie?
Emily, you go next.
I'm coming next. I'm trying to find a good one. Let's see.
Dun, dun.
I know.
Dun, dun, dun,
Okay,
dun.
so just any words of advice for our listeners that helped you the most to get through this?
Oh my gosh, Emily, what a tough question, because there's so many words of advice. This is one thing I learned more than anything else: patience. And you know what is patience for things you never thought you would need. So, for example, my mother was incontinent, as many old women are, and she oftentimes did not know that she needed to change her nappies, as she called them. And she wet my furniture a couple of times. And I just had to ignore, hey, Mom, would you like to go to the bathroom?
Yeah.
And clean up quietly behind her so she wouldn't be embarrassed.
Yeah.
So I would say that if you can reach way in the depths of yourself and find patience and just say to yourself, This is an old woman. She doesn't know she's peeing in her pants. Oh, it's leaking on my couch. She doesn't know she broke the wine glass. You just know she's enjoyed the glass of wine. That you just have to be patient as like have the patience of what is it? Patience of Job or something.
That is right. Patience
Job
of Job
himself.
Yeah. That's like such a key. You just have to count to 10 and just say, I can do this.
That's a good one.
Thank you, Carrie Underwood, because I can't tell you how many times I say a day, Jesus, take the wheel. Because I can't handle it.
Yes, Carrie Underwood. Thank you, Carrie Underwood, who may want to clearly Carrie Underwood. Hashtag Jesus take the wheel. There ain't nothing there ain't nothing glamorous about caregiving. I'm not gonna lie to you. If you could tell me what it is, but I think, Robin, what you keep saying is find the silver lining, find the glimmers that because even in that, I know there is a story if you want to tell it. But what is the one story you will never forget? Like when you talk to your friends, you'll be like, you cannot make this up. And you have to laugh so you don't cry.
Well, I have a few, but you know which one I want to tell you.
I want you to tell us your favorite one. That is fantastic.
I never looked for the silver lining. What I looked for were I call them the gifts in caregiving.
Okay.
Okay, like the little gifts, the little moments, the smiles, the funny story, the joke. Like my mother saying, that woman's got on, and she's like, "What's the difference?" You have to really look for the little gifts. So the story I have to tell you that I will never forget, and I have several of them, but I'll share this one with you, and you know it's coming. So this was while my mother was in her assisted living apartment, and I would take her out frequently to lunch. So I went to pick her up one day to take her out to lunch, and she got into the car, and I sat there, I was going, and I said, "Mom, something smells funny." And she said, "I don't smell anything." So I went, "Well, I think you might need to change your pants. Let's go inside." So we go inside the building. There's a lobby, right? And there's off to the side is the dining room where they eat. And then there's like a bathroom, a ladies' room. And it's, it's very nice. It's got a bench and a couple of stalls. And I said, "Mom, why don't you go in there?" So she had completely soiled herself. I mean, she didn't even know it. She had completely soiled herself. And she says, "Oh." I'm like, "Hand me your pants, Mom." So she hands the soiled pants under the bathroom stall door. I carried them over and threw them in the garbage.
You ain't keeping them pants. I can tell you that right now. I didn't either. I didn't either.
I said, "Mom, stay right there. I'll run upstairs to your apartment and get you some clean clothes." Well, I start to walk out, and she comes out of the stall naked from the waist down. She says, "What'd you do with my pants?" I said, "Threw them away." I said, "Mom, we'll go buy you some new pants, okay? Let's just not think about that. Sit right there, and I'll go get you some clean clothes." As I started to walk out the door, this other resident starts to walk in. I'm like, my mother, she doesn't have pants on. The woman turned around and looked at her. She said, "That's all right."
Okay, so Robin, you broke up a little bit. So the woman's coming in to the bathroom, and you say, oh, she doesn't have any pants on?
Right, yeah.
And the woman says what?
She turned around and looked at my mother sitting on the bench there, naked from the waist down. She says, "Oh, that's okay."
I mean, totally. That's okay, total normal.
Naked, that's okay.
It happens all the time. You know what? Pants are overrated. It says, you know what? Yeah. The other thing is, in most restaurants, it technically says shirt and shoes required. So, pants are optional. Oh, my
Robin,
goodness.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for sharing your confession, especially that last one, because you know what we say, that you have to laugh just a little bit. So
thank you. You have to laugh a lot.
a lot. Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks to all of our listeners for coming by and listening to us today as well.
Well, friends, that's a wrap on this week's confession. Again, thank you so much for listening. But before you go, please take a moment to leave us a review and tell your friends about the Confessions podcast. Don't forget to visit our website to sign up for our newsletter. You'll also find the video recording of all of our episodes on the Confessions website and our YouTube channel. Don't worry, all the details are included in the show notes below. We'll see you next Tuesday when we come together to confess again. Till then, take care of you. Okay, let's talk disclaimers. You may be surprised to find out, but we are not medical professionals and are not providing any medical advice. If you have any medical questions, we recommend that you talk with a medical professional of your choice. As always, my sisters and I at Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver have taken care in selecting the speakers, but the opinions of our speakers are theirs alone. The views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted and no part can be reproduced without the express written consent of the Sisterhood of Care, LLC.